Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today, since Mercury is in retrograde and will be for about 3 weeks, I want to dispel of three myths about Mercury retrograde that have been perpetuated by pop astrology. Okay, I'm not a fan of pop astrology. Pop astrology is the oversimplification and bastardization of this very ancient set of calculations and techniques for understanding ourselves. And almost everything that it tells you is either flat out false or is a half truth. Okay, or it's not like placing value and importance on the things that need to be understood for you to properly understand yourself and move through whatever transits are happening in a meaningful and self-aware way. Okay, so what astrology is for. It's a tool for becoming more self-aware and owning what you choose to do rather than simply floating down that river of life on a raft without a paddle and having to react to things as they come up. Okay, the better you know yourself, the more grounded you are in the principles that you live by, and the more confidently you can navigate the river of life. Okay, so myth number one is that Mercury, or any planet for that matter, in its retrograde period is actually stopping in its orbit or slowing down or moving backward. This is actually false. It only looks that way because we calculate transits and an astrology chart of any sort, a birth chart, from our perspective here on Earth. So notice in a birth chart, if you look at a bunch of them, you'll notice that Mercury never moves further than one sign away from where the sun is. Well, look up into the sun right now. Well, maybe you shouldn't exactly do that, but where is Mercury? Mercury is between us here on Earth and the sun. It's the closest planet to the sun. So there are periods where it sort of looks like it's moving backwards or it's slowing down or stopping, depending on where the Earth is in orbit in relation to Mercury. Okay, so that's the first myth. Remember, astrology is a geocentric system. It's not heliocentric. Okay, don't make it super anthropocentric as if it's all about us and say that oh my god, that external thing out there is doing this, there's nothing I can do about it, I'm a slave. Okay, now, you're not a slave to your anything, to your birth chart. Okay, you're more than that. You're meant to be able to transcend it, and the only way you can do that is to understand some of these myths. Okay, so Mercury only appears as though it's slowing down or stopping or moving backward in its retrograde period because it is the closest planet to the sun, and it's never behind us in relation to the sun. Therefore, would never be in opposition to the sun. It would never be squared. It would never be trined. Okay, it only appears that way. Remember, these symbols, these orbiting bodies in the solar system give us metaphors and analogies for understanding ourselves. It gives us reference points for understanding our place in the universe, and therefore something about our purpose and where how it is that we're different in reference to externals. Okay. So Mercury is not actually slowing down or moving backward. It just appears that way because we calculate birth charts from our perspective here on Earth. All right, second myth is that it's a bad thing and that it affects everyone in a way, something like slowing down mental processing, and that somehow makes everyone prone to errors. And also that systems fail because Mercury is not just about mental processing and speech and language and communication. It's also about technological systems. But obviously we use our tools and our tools of language and ones and zeros to because coding is a language unto itself, to create technological systems. So an error in our thinking could produce an error in a technological system. So anyway, there's very little evidence. There is a little bit, but it's minuscule, that technological systems actually do fail during Mercury retrograde period. This really comes down to knowing how to tell the difference between good and bad sampling and good and bad studies. All right. That's something that I can teach you if we do a consulting session, because one of my areas is also philosophy of science and philosophy of psychology. But that's not really the main thing here. You shouldn't just pause your life and pause decision making because of Mercury retrograde. Okay. In fact, it's not very clear if you take self-ownership and self-awareness on the individual level out of the equation. It's not clear at all that Mercury retrograde is bad for everyone. In fact, as far as signs go, depending on what sign it's stationing in and what aspect it's making to your own chart, it's likely to be good for just as many people as it is bad or negative or difficult. Okay. Someone with a very active mind whose ability to process their thoughts can't keep up with the rate at which their thoughts are coming in, that person more often than not really really benefits from Mercury retrograde, this slowing down of processing, because it slows down the influx of thoughts that they are receiving and having to deal with. So they end up, being in a place where their mouth can keep up with their mind. And that's a good thing. And it's like that for roughly half of people all the time, whether you're like that naturally or whether the aspects that Mercury is making during the time of its retrograde lend you to that. All right. So that brings me to another kind of side point. It's not about the fact that Mercury is in retrograde doesn't really have any value on its own. The main thing is, where is it in your chart and which aspects is it making to your birth chart placements, and for how long are those aspects going to be of significance for you? It's usually about 3 weeks. Okay. Remember, aspects give us the most psychologically rich information about us of any singular thing that we can point to in the birth chart. So when Mercury is in retrograde, when it's stopping in a particular part of your chart, remember, not in actual space, but in a part of your chart, it's going to be making certain aspects and conjunctions, oppositions to planets in your birth chart that is going to really raise a higher level of significance for you. Maybe Mercury is going to be at the apex of a T-square with some opposing planets in your birth chart. That would be very significant. That would be a deep time for reflection and boundary setting. So the particulars matter, and again, you have to know yourself before you jump to conclusions about how Mercury retrograde is going to affect you, because it doesn't affect everyone the same. And the third point is kind of like something I've already touched on in these first 2 points. The third myth about Mercury retrograde is that it's a big deal. Again, it's not. All right. Externals only affect us and have significance to the extent that we are lacking understanding and ownership of ourselves, of our own values, of our own principles that we're living by, our own words, our own actions. Okay. That's what astrology helps you to do in a very nuanced way, is to understand yourself on all of those deeper levels, so that you can be an individual, and an individual who is able to work more gracefully and more authentically with other people who have their own birth chart and therefore their own innate personality traits that they're sort of stuck with, but are charged and have a duty to transcend in this lifetime. Okay, so Mercury retrograde is just another external factor that has some effect on us when it happens. And if you want to know exactly how it's going to affect you, feel free to book a consultation with me. That's what I do, birth chart astrology, as well as compatibility astrology. But again, it's just another external. Okay, and the better you know yourself, despite externals, the better you're going to be able to deal with externals and anticipate things as they happen before they happen, as opposed to simply reacting to all of the things in life that can affect us. So anyway, that's my video on 3 common misconceptions that pop astrology just blasts everyone with in the tabloids, in your horoscopes, and in astrology section of Cosmo and wherever you're getting your information from. Okay, and I hope you can actually come to understand yourself a little better during this Mercury retrograde period, because it is a time for reflection, a slowing of thought, a slowing of processing, and taking your time, right? Again, that can be difficult, especially difficult for someone who already takes their time. Maybe it's a time of action for you. Okay, depends what's going on in your chart. If you want to know more about that, book a consultation with me, and hope you enjoy the video. Have a nice day.